So before we hit record, we were talking about our favorite candy because it is Halloween. We're recording on a Monday. A little
Yes,
weird, but the Islanders play the Chicago Blackhawks tomorrow at 8:30 at night, and we decided to not be up all night watching the game and recording and doing all that because we feel old. So recording on Monday.
I also have
Happy
to cover the Devils game at 10 p.m. because they're in Vancouver. So
tomato.
Double duty for me tomorrow, which is boo tomato is right.
But we're going to concentrate on the Islanders and Halloween. So favorite Halloween candy. I also don't think you can guess mine.
Okay. Well, all right. So is it chocolate or is it gummy?
Chocolate.
We get three of these. We get three of these. Three questions. So it's chocolate. Is it a single ingredient or multiple?
Multiple.
And does it come in in multiple sections, or is it one bar?
Multiple sections.
Okay. I feel Kit Kat's too obvious. Multiple sections.
That might be an overrated candy bar in my opinion. It is good, but I feel like it's a little overrated.
Multiple. I don't know. I'm not on my game with multiple sections of candy bars.
Take 5. I love a Take 5.
That's an excellent one.
Yeah, it's a little off the board. I see it. It's in grocery stores up here. I've seen it around, but it's not as common. Like it's definitely not a Halloween candy. You have to go to, I don't know who's giving those out.
Yeah, and I just saw recently Reese's makes their own variation of the Take 5. It's got like the pretzels, the peanuts, the caramel, the chocolate, and the peanut butter in it, and obviously Reese's. I wonder if they're the same company or not now that I'm thinking about it.
I don't even know who makes Take 5. It's just in a red. It used to be red wrapper, and they'd come in like 2 or 4. And they were great road trip candy because you can just kind of like take one and pop it in, a couple bites. Love the salty sweet all together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, that's a really
same
good
questions. Same questions to you.
So my mom grew up trying to force her love of 100 grand on me, and I do enjoy 100 grand, but it's not my favorite.
This is already too long.
You said Kit Kat's an overrated candy. Kind of broke my heart a little bit, but I'm gonna go with Twix. I love Twix.
Oh, I was gonna ask you the questions. You just blew it.
Oh,
all right. Well, you're not good at this game.
That totally slipped my mind. I'm not good at this game. I'm gonna be better at the game at the end of the show.
Yeah, we'll do it. We're doing another little game show at the end. You know who was good at these games? The New York Islanders. A week worth of wins for the New York Islanders this week. All 3 since the last time we recorded, which that was not the feeling that I think either of us got. We knew it was a big week. It was going to be really tough. Depending on how they lost, 1 and 2 wouldn't have been the worst thing, just to kind of see the team improve a little bit. Expectations kind of blown out of the water. Seemed like a little bit of a season reset, particularly that Carolina game. But we'll jump into that. Before that, though, waiving Kieffer Bellows. Lou Lamoriello waives Kieffer Bellows the day of the Ranger game, I believe, on Wednesday the 26th. So I want to talk about that first. We've discussed that it was a troubling or questionable signing to begin with, tying up $1.2 million, not being able to kind of maybe sign some depth. Now they open up a roster spot. Have they recalled Robin Salo? I don't think he's played in the last 3 games, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe he's with the team right now, though, on their road trip. He practiced with them this morning, so I don't remember seeing an official recall, but he's there. Which is funny that now that I'm saying that, because I did learn recently talking to somebody the other day at the Devils game that, it's funny, like, if you send a player through waivers and they clear, did you know that all they have to do is they have to physically show up in person to, let's say, Bridgeport, say hello, and then they could leave and go right back to the Islanders and practice with them and stay with them if they really wanted to, or if the team really wanted that player to do so. They don't have to stay in Bridgeport. If let's say, for instance, Lou Lamoriello said, "We're waiving you. You're going to Bridgeport, but you're coming back to practice with us. You're technically on paper in Bridgeport, but you're coming to us." I didn't know that was allowed, and I found out the other day that players can do that.
Interesting, because that was kind of what needed to happen. Bellows needed to be waived, or another player needed to be waived in order to open up a roster spot to bring back Robin Salo. Now, I suspected early last week that any decision that was going to be made about that waiver by one of the players on the Islanders getting waived was going to happen ahead of the team's road trip, because they were not going to go on this road trip with 6 defensemen. They were going to find a way to get a 7th, and it was just a matter of how that was going to happen. A trade seemed unlikely, um, even though there were some rumors about Kieffer Bellows and a deal being made. Um, it just didn't seem like that formulated. So, just your thoughts on Kieffer Bellows being waived by the New York Islanders?
Yeah. So real quick, officially, Robin Salo was recalled. Just wanted to make that note. But um, I you said it best in the summer, right? Why did this player receive a $1.2 million one-way deal? What did he do to prove himself to be worthy of that kind of a contract, right? So the Islanders put themselves in a little bit of a bind there when it came to the time that they had to make a decision on him. Now, another excellent point that you made this summer was if you're going to sign him to that contract, or if you don't sign him to that contract, sorry, you have a little bit more room to play with and maybe bringing in somebody else who will actually contribute to the lineup, right? So I don't know. It didn't surprise me to see him being waived, um, because of who he is. It surprised me to see him being waived just because I really thought that Lamorello was going to injured reserve his way out of this, like he always seemingly did. But
That would have been
not.
very hard the whole season.
No, I
Like,
agree with you.
it needed to happen, and that's why I speculated, or I educated guess rather, that it was going to happen this week, or it was
Yeah,
leading up to this, where they were going to start going on the road. They couldn't play that game. You can't go on the road with
right.
6 defensemen, so that was pretty much bound to happen. I don't know that it was a surprise to anybody.
Yeah. So, long story short, here they waive Bellows. He gets picked up by the Flyers, and my initial reaction was, all right, is what it is, right? Like the Islanders didn't give him much of a chance to prove himself because they again signed into that contract. He spoke a big game of, I can be a contributor, I can score, but they let him play once. So if they're not going to use him, then maybe he should be in Bridgeport where he can play. But the only way that he could have gotten there is if he cleared, and unfortunately he didn't. Or maybe fortunately for him, he didn't, because now he's with the Flyers. He did play a single game the other night. Nothing special. He went -1 through 3 hits and recorded a giveaway in 11 minutes and 50 seconds. So you know, eh, I don't feel like they lost anything just because he's been with the organization since 20. What do you get drafted? 2016. I believe it was, or I'm looking
Yeah,
at his thing right now.
26
Yeah,
2016,
2016,
19th overall, 2016.
19th overall. 2019 was his first season, so it took him a little while to get there, and nothing really special since. He scored 6 goals and 13 assists in 45 games last season, which was okay, for his first real NHL season. Um, but he didn't really show anything. So the Flyers need bodies. They took a gamble on him, and look, if it works out for him there, great. But it just wasn't working out for him with the Islanders, and they have other guys now coming through the pipeline who have surpassed him in terms of. And I know he wasn't a prospect, but in prospect status, quote unquote, they've surpassed him. Ratu, Dufour, maybe even this kid Ruslan Iskakov, who I don't know if you've paid attention, John, but he's third overall in scoring in the AHL. So
Yeah, 11 points in 7 games, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he looks fantastic. Like, he's the AHL's Johnny Gaudreau right now. Um, so listen, is what it is. Not a major loss. They gained $1.2 million against the cap. Uh, you know, good luck.
Yeah, I mean, Kieffer Bellows, it looked like he had 50 points in 125 games in the AHL, which isn't great. So he didn't really set the world on fire down there, and you know, it's less than full seasons. So he played 73 games and then 52 games, and then he was kind of on the Islanders roster just as a cheap player, that 13th, 14th forward, and you could argue he really didn't get his chance. He played 45 games last season. He had 20 points in 45 games. Um, but for where the Islanders wanted to be this season and really push the needle, he was competing with like Zach Parise and Josh Bailey and Anthony Beauvlier and maybe to an extent Kyle Palmieri, although it's the opposite wing, depending on the line. So it just really wasn't going to work out, and I think Sashnikov brought more to the table as far as a
Yeah,
bottom six replacement, and he's cheaper. So I think he was playing that role better, and so you save 1.2 million off the cap, but you really you almost save a little bit more than that, because it's set 1.2 versus whatever Sashnikov is it's maybe 750.
yeah,
So you're getting that player cheaper, and you save the money, and you don't have to worry about playing him. Like, he's a 13th forward. That's what he's meant to be.
yeah.
Bellows, I think they felt a little pressured to play him a little bit. So, and
Let's let's not
I
forget
don't know.
too, right? You mentioned Kiefer Bellows' AHL stats. His best season also came after he was found guilty of PEDs. That kind of got swept under the rug. He served his time or suspension. We found that out after the fact. So his best season came after he was found guilty of that and he was suspended. And after that, he didn't really show much else, right? Remember that 1 month in the AHL where I think he had something absurd like 10 goals and like 25 points or something like that. Um, then suddenly he was found guilty of what he was found guilty of. So, and you're right. He was competing with there's too much of a logjam on the wings. Like it or not, Josh Bailey's looking better. So they're not going to not play him, especially at his cap hit. Oliver Wahlstrom is now playing on the first line with Mathew Barzal, and he actually looks pretty good. Um, Paul Mary
We're
wasn't
gonna
going to
we're gonna
get.
talk about we're gonna talk all about that later. So don't dive
Yeah,
into
yeah,
like
no, just like
the
brief, just
qualifications.
brief.
Just yeah,
Just there's just plenty of people ahead of him who look good or better.
yeah. It's a good point about the PEDs, and it's disappointing. Like the first thing I thought of is another what's becoming a long list of first round draft picks that just never materialized with the Islanders or are no longer with the team. Um, Josh Hosang, Michael Dal Cole, now Kieffer Bellows.
Yeah,
You want to go back a little bit further, yeah, is John Tavares, but there's a lot of first round draft picks that just haven't made it. Lou
yeah,
Lamoriello has not had one. Maybe his first season, which is kind of like he walked in in 2018 and picked Noah Dobson and Oliver Wahlstrom, if I'm not mistaken, in that first round.
correct.
So he really didn't have any time to like trade anything and kind of figure things out. He kind of just went to the draft, but since then he hasn't. 3 straight seasons they haven't had one. Um, Nelson and Beauvillier and some other players and Barzal obviously, um, over the years, but there's not a lot of first round draft picks that have stuck. Um, so the fact that a Ratu is around and a William Dufour is around, hopefully they can figure that out long term, and fill that pipeline, because there are going to be a few spots eventually open in that lineup. It really just depends on their development. But um, moving on a little bit here to the wins over the last week against the Rangers, Hurricanes, and Avalanche. Um, I want to talk about that Ranger game. Sorokin steals one.
Sure. Yes, he
And
did.
not to say that he didn't do that in the past, but it really felt like it was his game the entire time. And
Yeah.
that the Islanders really needed him to kind of they needed a hero. They needed somebody to step up, and Sorokin answered the call. And it was just a great I thought it was a great resilient win by him and the rest of the team.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny too. I was listening to some podcasts. I've been listening to a bunch of these. I can't remember who, but a good point was brought up that you expect that from the guy who is usually on the other end of the ice in that game, right? Igor Shesterkin didn't play. Obviously, it was Yaroslav Halak, but a lot of the comparisons of that game were drawn back to Igor Shesterkin. So, which is an excellent comparison to be made because he just won the Vezina last season, right? And now you're looking at a goaltender in Ilya Sorokin who is regarded as one of those guys who, if the Islanders make the playoffs, because apparently that's an unwritten requirement, he could possibly win the Vezina this year if he plays the way he has started this season. So um, Sorokin is gonna do that, man. You and I have spoken about, the Islanders haven't had a goaltender like this since the early Rick DiPietro days, right? Um, but he's just, he's getting better every game, which is crazy. Like dating back to when he started with the Islanders, not just like this season. He's getting better every game he plays. The athleticism is off the charts. The positioning is just perfect. Like he had some small intricacies in his game when he first came over to the North American ice that he needed to figure out, but now he's just like he's lights out. The New York Rangers, look, they came in on a 3-game slide. The Islanders handed them their 4th loss in a row, which is kind of crazy to say about a Rangers team who has been projected to be 1 or 2 in the Metropolitan Division and possibly go to the Stanley Cup, not just the playoffs. But Sorokin really just put the team on his back that game. And the Islanders didn't play fantastic in front of him. They just played good enough at a point. Kyle Palmieri wound up potting 2 goals. Josh Bailey gets his first of the season. They did enough in front of him to, win the game, but they don't win that game without Sorokin doing what he did. There was probably, 4 or 5 saves that he made in that game that probably should have found the back of the net. So the New York Rangers, if I'm not mistaken, scored like 3.5 goals per game last season. That's and the 41 shots they put up um, is a good endorsement of that, right? So they probably should have scored a lot more than they did in that game. And they have actually wound up with a goose egg. And Sorokin just again he stole a game, and that's a sign of a good team sometimes, right? Your team's not always going to play well in front of you, but if you have the goaltending to back it, and fortunately for the Islanders, they might have the best goaltending in the NHL with the tandem they have. You're going to need a goaltender to steal one for you every once in a while, and that's what Sorokin did.
I thought in addition to Sorokin, who like I said, I think every game you need a different hero or 2 or 3 different players to play a significant role in your win, and you need the rest of the lineup to just play a supporting role. It's not your night every night. Some nights you're gonna play better than others. Bounces are gonna go your way, but you really for the Islanders, you just really need a couple players. And I thought what I really liked about this is Kyle Palmieri gets 2.
Yeah.
Um, Josh Bailey gets 1. Sorokin's really good. Those are your 3 players. Everyone else just needs to play their role and play defense. Lock it down, play a good game. And that's ultimately what happens. So I like that. Like I don't need Kyle Palmieri to do that every night. I need him to do that every once in a while. When there's an opportunity, the team needs a couple goals. I need him to step up and do that. Right? He's playing on the third line. His role with Pajot and Parise, that the P3 line, although no one said that yet, I'm a little disappointed. But I coined that in the summer. I thought that would be a good line, especially for Lambert, who wants to set an example for some of the younger players and say this is how a line should play. This is what I expect out of this team. Um, with the offense, the way that Parise plays, the 3 of them are pretty hard nosed for being smaller guys, and I like that line. So it's nice to see the 3 of them playing really well together. and getting rewarded on the score sheet, not just in praise like what a good third line, kind of like the fourth line used to be. Um,
Yeah.
so
W- uh,
I like that he got rewarded there and had a couple goals.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little later about how like the lines, if they're working and what they look like right now. But the thing about those goals from Palmieri, it's crazy because like I watched those 2 goals he scored. Those are goal scorers' goals, right? He got all of those pucks, bar downs, top shelves, and I watched him score those goals. And I'm like, man, he can really sling it. Why does he disappear? Because it's not like he doesn't play a hard game night in and night out. I'd attribute his effort to the same of Parise when he's on the ice. But something about Palmieri, he scores in bunches. Kind of like how Brock Nelson used to do it. He's become more consistent now. But Brock Nelson used to score in bunches, right? You saw the ability. Obviously, now he can do it, but Kyle Palmieri is similar in that sense where, you'll see him score 2 goals like he did against the Rangers, and then the next 4 or 5 games he won't, and then he'll score 2 more or even a hat trick, or he'll score 3 or 4 in 2 games and then go missing for a week. He's been a 25 goal scorer. If he could just, I mean, and look, he's on the third line now, so maybe it's a moot point, but he has that ability. He could score 20, 25 goals. And if the Islanders get that from him, that's a treat. So, and we're gonna it's Halloween. So that's a treat for them.
I think even on that third line, I think I had said this, like if Parise and Palmieri can score 10 to 15 goals, 15 on the high end, like that would be a lot. 9 to 11 goals each realistically for the season would be great.
Yeah.
Parise's got he picked up one in the Carolina game. If you want to move on to that as well, a 6-2 victory. And what I think was a really, really big statement game for them, right? The Rangers, I think you can come out, it's emotional. It's a rival. You're coming off a losing streak. You have to win that game. You can't
Sure.
go into the weekend uh, losing 4 in a row. That's a lot of pressure. So they take some pressure off. They win that game. Sorokin kind of steals one. Palmieri comes alive. That's great. That Carolina game, though, to me, and I think I even tweeted it from our account. That was the turnaround game for the season. If this season
Yeah.
continues this way, where they're actually sneaking up and making a very serious run for the playoffs, right? From there, they're an actual contender. We know what they can do if they make the playoffs, but they got to get there. So if they
Yeah.
actually get, they wound up in the whatever the wild card doesn't really even matter. That I'm going to point to that game in particular as that helped them turn around because they beat a very good defensive team with a good goalie 6-2. And I think that's a really big deal. And I thought in the one game you only needed a couple heroes. And in that one, it showed the depth of their scoring and what they were able to do. Every line had a goal. And Nelson got 2, which is great for October. But every line was contributing. So while on some nights you only need 3 goals, it's nice when your whole lineup can kind of find a way to contribute. What did you see from that game? And again, another brilliant performance by Sorokin, not to be,
Sure.
outdone by the offense. 943 save percentage on 35 shots for the game and 33 saves.
Yeah. So it was funny because like I didn't watch that game live. I was covering another team at the time, but I did go back and watch it, later. And a couple things just really came together in this game, right? Obviously, like you said, Sorokin had a really good performance, but you started to see the from the get go. Barzal feeds Wahlstrom for that beautiful opening goal that you just love to see a guy who likes to distribute the puck, pass it to a guy who just loves to rip it and seamlessly, right? The puck barely touches Wahlstrom's stick and it's already in the back of the net.
You haven't
Love to see
seen that
that.
since Tavares and Name a Winger. Right. So
Sure.
like, it's been 5, like it feels like 4 or 5 years. That was what he did with like Parento and Oposo and
Yeah.
Molson and like, and those I hate that like I think those players are near and dear to the like certain Islander fans' hearts just from those
Sure.
time periods. But like we all know Tavares made them those players. I mean, he made them a lot of money. So
Yeah.
good on him. But he never really had that player. So I can't even think of a 1-2 punch that was quite like that.
Right.
That we haven't seen that connection. It just looked too good. That looked like a highlight on like an ESPN highlight or something else where someone's like, that's how that's done. And it's been a long time since you've seen it in none of the jerseys.
Right. So and one of the things or two of the things you're seeing there is okay, Barzal starting to come into his own and be that point per game player we're looking for. Wahlstrom starting to come into his own and know where Barzal's going to be on the ice, know where he has to be positionally to start filling the net. And guess what he does, right? Then, Nee just ties the game at 1 in the second period. But what happens a couple minutes later? The fourth line, the fourth line who kind of looks like shades of their former selves. And that might be being a little pessimistic. They look a little bit better than that, honestly. Um, Matt Martin forces a turnover and winds up scoring. They do give it right back, but they take it right back after again. Who takes over a shift? Mathew Barzal distributes the puck to Josh Bailey, who made an excellent, beautiful move to beat Frederick Anderson and give them the lead again. Then they just put the pedal to the metal in the third period and just take over Brock Nelson 2 goals in the empty net from Zach Parise.
And that was the statement that
Last
I thought. Like that was the response. Usually it's the other way around. The
well,
Islanders
okay, so because what I was
tie
gonna
the
say is
game. Go ahead. Go ahead.
last year's team folds. They didn't do that. And they didn't do that against a formidable opponent in the Carolina Hurricanes, who are projected to win the division and be a deep playoff threat again. They went into Carolina and took over that game, which is look, it's early. 10% of the season has passed, which is a decent sample size. That game, like you said, that's the turnaround. And that you look at that game and you say, because honestly, the Hurricanes aren't missing that much, right? They never had Pacioretty to start, but they do have Brent Burns now, and they have good goaltending in Frederick Anderson, and they have a really deep team. They lost Nino Niederreiter, but they have guys like Martin Nietzsche stepping up, and I forget the other prospect's name on their team right now who's really good, but the Hurricanes are a threat. They're a top team in the NHL, and the Islanders went into their home, took over the game after a bit of a back and forth, put the pedal to the metal, and came away with that win convincingly. So it was a good statement by you saying that this was the turnaround because again, that team in 2021-22, they fold. They
Yeah,
fold.
and it's usually the other way around too. It was the Islanders who would tie the game and then let it back up on the next shift, like 17 seconds
Correct.
later. So it's like, yeah, they would either fold or they were the team um, that was in that position where they, even if they were a good team, and then over the last 2 seasons when they were a pretty good team, that would happen pretty often. Historically, I feel like that happened. The Islanders gave up, they tied the game and gave it right back up in within 30 seconds, and that's really tough. And I like the way that you said that. They got the lead back and then just never looked back.
Yeah.
They regained the lead and never looked back. And I think that was, to me, that was what was really telling. Um, Again, the scoring was very spread out, and you like to see that. And
Yeah.
that was, I think that game, and we're kind of going through all these games pretty quickly, but I think it tells a story here. And we're going to get to some other bigger questions about that, but I think for now, when you look at that and you're going from game to game, it really gave them the confidence in the game against the Avalanche, perhaps their best opponent in the weekend. That's really not a knock on those other two teams. This is the defending Stanley Cup champions we're talking
Oh, of
about here,
course.
and they kind of went in there. They get down 3-0, and you have to have, at that point, you have to have a belief in yourself. And that, what I said last week is, if you remember, when we can tell they're giving up on each other, that's when there's a real problem on this team, and you got to just sell. There's no recapturing the group. If it's falling apart, it's falling apart. As at that point, it has nothing to do with what you think the skill is on paper and all of that kind of stuff. They're not playing for one another. They're not stepping up for one another. That's when you have a real problem. I think that's a problem with a
Right.
lot of these teams that can't get over that hump. That was like, San Jose for all those years, or St. Louis for all those years, or Toronto forever. A lot of these teams where there's like that next step playing for one another and really stepping up. They're just not capable of that for whatever reason, whether that's leadership or coaching or both. The makeup of the room, any kind of that stuff, the chemistry. Um, this was like the second statement game, right? They're not able to do that against the Avalanche if they don't have that statement the night before. The Avalanche was a kind of a different story because they really took over the second half of that game.
Yeah.
And again, the scoring was the scoring was spread out. And I like some goals came from the defenseman, another one from Scott Mayfield. That's his third of the season.
Yeah, well,
Um,
let's talk about that goal. Let's talk about that goal specifically, just because I tweeted this out with the video that we've been asking, and Scott Mayfield was the goal scorer, but the play was made by Mathew Barzal, and we've been asking for a long time if Mathew Barzal can be the guy who takes over a game, takes over a shift. We've had this conversation a lot, and drag his team to a win, and they were down a goal. He enters the zone with the puck, takes a shot at the right circle, gets his own rebound, takes it to the far wall, skates the defender out of his own skates, finds ice in front of him to make a play with his head up the entire time, mind you, and threads a needle to Scott Mayfield for a beautiful assist to tie that game. That was the moment for me when I said, okay, Mathew Barzal is going to score 82 points or more this season. He's got 10 assists right now in, I believe it's 9 games. He has yet to score. That's coming. He can stand to shoot more, and I think that's going to happen. But the way that they played the game against the Hurricanes was impressive enough because of that back and forth, and they finally they said, you know what, we're taking this game. Against the Avalanche, though, they were down 3-0 with half of the game already behind them. Most people seeing the matchup say defending Stanley Cup champions Nathan McKinnon, Kel McCarr, they got it in the bag. The Islanders took over again. They said, nope, not happening. And I wrote about this earlier, a piece that came out today. Lambert said after the second loss to the Florida Panthers on October 23rd that there was no concern that the right pieces are here. It's a matter of just generating the chemistry and getting the right, I guess, affairs in order with the lineup. We're going to talk about that too, like I said earlier, but it looks like the right buttons have been pushed, and the sentiment ever since Lou Lamoriello stepped into the GM's chair has been the same in the locker room, that there's no concern about the right pieces. These guys believe in themselves and they play for each other, and it was so incredibly evident this week. So incredibly evident that they really do play for each other. They beat 3 teams who are all in the conversation to play in the Stanley Cup.
yeah,
And they
Cizikas
did it
is
twice coming from behind. I mean, that's pretty absurd.
yeah, Cizikas, made a mention some time ago. I was reading Kevin Kerr's article um, earlier today, and he said like it just taking some time to really get those systems together and figure some stuff out. But we saw it when it works, right?
Yeah.
And just to go back to Barzal for a second, and the impressive season he's off to in 9 games. Um, a few people had this, but I'm reading Joe Pantorno's tweet. Mathew Barzal is the first Islanders skater since Vladimir Malakov, and I believe this is on the broadcast as well, in 1993 with 10 assists in the New York Islanders' first 9 games of the season. Only the 15th time in franchise history this has happened. So this
Yeah.
is
There you go.
definitely the player, and I think if even if Barzal was a 75-point guy and it was 15 goals and 55 assists, it's a really good season on a team that, historically hasn't scored a bunch of goals, even though that's what it is. But that means the players around him are scoring goals. That means at this point, Bailey's got 20 goals. That means Wahlstrom's got 20 goals. And probably some on the power play. Obviously, he's assisting on players like Scott Mayfield and different things like that. So I think that's good for the Islanders. They really don't need to have anyone set the world on fire. They need to use their depth and that scoring to win games, or they just need somebody like a Palmieri and their goalie to step up. They need to hit someone to score two goals and for Sorokin to stay on their head. And some nights that's enough. On some nights you need to score 6 goals and then you need to score 5 the next. Empty nets, notwithstanding, but 4 and 5 goals at either even strength or on the power play, and it's good to know that they can play that game too. 3-0 is more of an Islander win. Those other games, I don't know that I would expect that on a regular basis. And 2 games in a row, back to back no less, is a really, really good sign for a team that wasn't expected to be in it, and it's a reversal of that losing streak.
Nassaumen Hockey is brought to you by DraftKings. Hey hockey fans, it's finally time to hit the ice again, and thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, you're in for the season of a lifetime. New customers can bet $5 on any team and get $200 in free bets if they win. As an Islander fan, you're probably pretty stoked with the way Ilya Sorokin's season has started in net. Why not throw some money down on the chance that he'll win the Vezina Trophy by the end of the season? If that wasn't enough excitement, you can turn small bets into bigger payouts with the same game parlays. Combine multiple bets like which team will win, how many goals will be scored, and more for your shot at an even bigger payout. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you'd like. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, use promo code THPN, bet $5 on any NHL team to win their game, and get $200 in free bets if they do. That's code THPN at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. 2 quick side notes. One, I just want to gloss over. Do you know who leads the NHL right now in expected goals per 60 minutes?
The New York Islanders.
No, sorry, individual player.
Individual player. Zach Parise.
It is Zach Parise. 2.29 expected goals per 60 minutes. That's almost a full goal expected per 60 to the next best player, Sam Bennett at 1.55. So that just is a little attribute to how well Zach Parise is playing. 38 years old, on the third line for the New York Islanders, but leads the league in expected goals per 60. Good for Zach. But the other thing I wanted to really quickly mention, I don't think you put it in the show notes here. No. So one of the things that you have to look at and obviously mention as one of the main reasons why the Islanders are playing so well right now. The Hurricanes went 0 for 3 on their power play. The Avalanche
Scored 1.
Did they scored 1?
Yep.
Okay, so they went 1 for 2. The Islanders are 28 for 29 in penalty kills, or 29 for 30 in penalty kills. What? What? That's
It shows their defensive structure. It shows that that part of their game is still there, and maybe the last 3 or 4 seasons was not that it wasn't a fluke, but it's really in their DNA to do that, and that's what playoff teams do.
But the thing I'm seeing that's a little bit different is, this is not Trott's slander. I absolutely loved everything he did. It's just a different approach where they're taking a little bit of that structure that they learned under Trotz, but they're using the new aggressiveness that Lambert is trying to instill, and it's constant puck pressure. Pressure that puck, no matter where it is. Push the puck up the ice, and what I mean by that is like just be in your opponent's face. If the puck is on their stick, be on their stick. Put your stick on their stick. Put your body on their body. Make them make a bad play. And I think that's what Lane Lambert is doing so well with this team is really promoting playing aggressive in-your-face hockey.
I'll move on to you bring up Lambert. I definitely want to talk about the lines and ultimately where Lambert has landed with them. So we have Bailey, Barzal, Wahlstrom, um, Lee, Nelson, Beauvlier, Parise, Peugeot, Palmieri, and then the fourth line. Um, has he found what works? Is this the recipe for success? And does he need to stick with it for some time until it doesn't? Right? Like I don't
Yeah,
think was even the lineup for all three games, frankly. But it was the majority of it was
yeah,
around this. Even if it starts to not work and they lose, they really shouldn't lose against Chicago. But if they falter, maybe it's a tighter game than they would have liked or anyone would have liked. Does he need to stick with it for a little bit?
I think so. Just because it's such a small sample size, right? I believe the game it started was against the Rangers. That was the first time you saw 12, 13, 26 up top, and then everything else as it fell. But e even if it, let's say, for instance, it doesn't work against Chicago for some reason, you can't, "Okay, didn't work, switch it." Like, you have to let them continue to build that chemistry. Lambert did say, even to the question that was asked about, "What are you seeing with Barzell and Wahlstrom?" He said, I'm seeing a little bit of something." The following game, they friggin' scored a goal together. So, um you have to allow them to continue to build that chemistry. There are going to be blunders on the ice. It's going to happen. You have to let them work through those things. And if it's going on for weeks on end, yeah, that's when you change things up. But when it's one or two games where they're faltering a little bit, don't change it up. Let them figure it out, because the mistakes are what's going to lead to the success. They're going to learn from those mistakes. I think they're going to learn from the blunders, and they're going to come out on the other side hopefully a little smarter, a little wiser, and a little better. So I think they should leave these lines together. Is this the long term answer? Did Lane Lambert find it? Too soon to tell, right? Small sample size, like I said, but things look good. Things look good right now. I think 26 Wallstrom does belong with Barzell, because we said this earlier. It's the natural distributor with the natural shooter. You need that. Flanking them is Josh Bailey. Maybe that's the one piece that doesn't remain, right? I felt like Bailey played really well in limited minutes on the third line. Now he's on the first line, so he'll obviously be dependent on a little bit more.
And he
Maybe you
scored
figure out
goals in back-to-back games.
he did. You're right, and that's the thing. Like, he has these short windows where he looks really good, but then there might be short windows where he looks really bad, and you might say to yourself, or Lane might say to himself, okay, he needs less minutes for the next few games to get his legs back for a longer stretch of games coming up. So maybe you switch him with Parise, who can still friggin' fly on the ice at 38 years old. So I think that this mix right now should remain for at least the next little while, regardless of the outcome. If it happens to be, weeks on end where things aren't working and they're playing maybe 500 hockey, just kind of staying afloat, figure out what's going to get you to that next level and maybe mix it up a little bit. But for right now, it looks like this should remain.
Yeah, I would hate to see Lambert continue to kind of overcoach, and I thought that was the mistake in the kind of they were 2-4. It was still a lot of tinkering. It was still a lot of
Yeah.
trying to figure these things out. Now it helps when you start to win, and it feels like decisions you're making are validated when they're winning, and the lines are successful. But yeah, I agree. I think they need to kind of leave these alone for a little bit. I don't know, you say
Yeah.
weeks on end. I know you're just kind of exaggerating, but even just a week,
Yeah.
you go 500 in a certain week. Like, I don't know that that's a recipe to just, blow it up. And they don't really have a ton of options. Like, it's,
Right.
you're really moving around 12, 18, and 11. Like, so
Yeah.
there's not a lot you can do. Beauvillier didn't really seem to work out on that line. I think being anchored by Lee and Nelson is good for Beauvillier, and he's
It's
played
working
much
out.
better on that line. I think he's looked great. He's got at least one goal. I think he even scored two last week, um, and he looks good. And that was a player that we had a concern about heading into um, those three games, that we weren't sure. Like, how much longer, right? And he
Right.
might finally, I think I joked about on the show that I wrote about how he's a perennial breakout player. Eventually, you got to do it, right? And he's 25.
Sure.
It's not like he's going to go into his peak soon. He just has to do it. So if this is his coming out party finally in the last 2 years of his contract, or the second to last year of his contract, good for him because the team really needs it. And I think that's one of the more frustrating pieces for the Islanders is when you look at this lineup and you're like, Palmieri, what's going on? Beauvlier, what's going on? Nelson, what's going on? And you're like, these are all players that can score 20 goals. And I don't know that that's asking a whole lot. I know this is the best league in the world. I know that we're sitting and doing a podcast and not playing, but at the same time, like they've proven that they've shown those are things that they can do, and it's the hardest thing in the world to do that on a consistent basis. Forget about season to season, but even game to game. That's why players don't score every single game. That's why you don't see
Right.
82 goal game seasons, or that's why Gretzky has 92 in a season. That's ridiculous. Um, above a goal. That's even. I mean, the points. Forget about it at certain points, but all these players are capable of it. Matt Martin has 3,
I
right?
know.
Zach Parise has 3. Um, Wahlstrom has 2 or 3. Um, Nelson has, with a couple empty nets, I think, has 3. Um, so like the lineup, you're seeing that balance. Granted, they ran up the score a couple times, so it's gonna look a little inflated, but it's good that they're finding their game kind of throughout the course of the season. That throughout the lineup, all these guys can score. I can't say enough good things about the totality of the lineup, the lineup as a whole, kind of contributing to each of
Yeah.
these wins in their own way, and different players kind of showing up every single night. And the defense, it wasn't just a flash in the pan where some of these players are scoring. Dobson still, he ripped one the other night. He just wired that, and I think that was against the Colorado. I
Yeah.
think that was the first Islander goal to
That
get him
was
on
that
the
was what
board.
started the comeback.
But that's the confidence that you need. And he made, what does Butch say? He made no mistake. He wired that. That was incredible. So knowing that you have those types of players where it's like you have an extra second liner and Dobson scoring goals. Um, so I think, it only means good things. And the rest of the way, I wonder if there's a middle ground. They're not as bad as that losing streak in some of those early games, but they're not as good as winning 3 in a row against this type of quality team. What does that middle ground look like for the Islanders? Even better than middle ground, where they're winning more games than they're losing and really fighting for a playoff spot. What does that middle ground look like
You
for
know
the
what? It's funny you say that because I felt this way about the New York Rangers last season. I felt they weren't as good a team as they were showing out to be. They could score the goals, but they had a hard time defending. The only thing that got them, or I shouldn't say the only thing, the goals helped, but the main thing that really pushed them to the top of the division and into the playoffs was Igor Shesterkin. And I'm wondering if this is or this can continue to be the result for the Islanders if Ilya Sorokin becomes this year's Igor Shesterkin because he's already begun to do that. I mean, you know, 3-3 record, but he's 2.21 goals against and 933 save percentage. And he's facing the best of the best. So I that's the thing for me this year is the improved blue line in the sense that it's faster, and the ability to score. Listen, they also the Islanders also lead the league in goals for per 60 at 3.75. Can they just continue to score 3.5 goals a game? If they do, Sorokin's gonna make, you know 34 out of 35 saves a night. He's gonna do that. That's
Yeah,
gonna win
I just
games.
I do wonder about the scoring, and that might be where even when Sorokin or Varlamov allow 2 goals, that can't spell the end for the Islanders. And and they proved this week that it didn't, right? Um,
Right.
against a team like the Avalanche, which might be
And which
indicative. Maybe they just had a good game. Who knows? But
yeah, and Semyon Varlamov started that game. He had a good game.
yeah, and I think that's where you look at it's 3 games, but Varlamov's going to play 28 to 30 games ultimately, and Sorokin's going to play the rest.
Yeah.
Last year, and I've said this all summer about Varlamov, he needs to reverse his record. He can't go 10-17. He needs to go 17-10. Right? If you're going to play that, 17-10-2, um, they eventually need to lose a game in overtime and get one in and not in regulation, so they can collect some points here and there and stay alive in the race. Win the games in regulation, but if you're going to lose, try to push them to OT here,
Right.
or lose in the shootout. As annoying as that is for the most part, you kind of got to play the game. But Varlamov's 2-1. His numbers don't look great, 907, 303. Um, but you just have to win the games at a
Yeah.
certain point. You don't. He doesn't need to be the one that does it pretty. They need to be able to have confidence um, in who they're going to put in net, and it showed the confidence that the team had as a whole, putting in Sorokin in the game they thought they would win. They said, okay, if we can win this game against Carolina, um, we're going to put our better goalie in against this team because we think we can beat them more than if Sorokin or Varlamov was in net. It's going to be the harder of the 2 games. Let's get the win. Let's make sure we win that at least 2 out of 3 of these games. And then Varlamov shows up against Colorado on Saturday night. Um,
Yep.
it is Colorado, so they are going to score 3 or 4 goals a game. That's just not weird for them. But the resilience by the Islanders and kind of locking it down, I thought, was again indicative of maybe what this team is closer to, and um, hopefully it's how they can continue. Um, I want to take the rest of the show before our little trick or treat here, and go over some players, just kind of um, almost word association, stealing from they used to do this on 32 Thoughts. We've stolen it before, but I like it for the Islanders. Kind of, I'll throw the name out there and just a quick sentence or two on what you think about the player as of last week, or the season in general. Um, Josh Bailey, 1,000 games, stepped up the last few games. What do you think?
Uh, oh, you started me with a tough one there. The polarizing. Gonna go with one word there. He's polarizing.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with that. It's when he's good, and when he's not, even in the game he scored, I think it was game 999, so it was against Carolina. There were some of those plays just like he gave up. And then he like redeems himself. I think I even tweeted the Dumb and Dumber gif of
Yeah.
you totally redeem yourself. And then, and the next night he scores that beautiful tip in goal and is, you know, all of a sudden he's solidified on the first line. So it's damned if you do, damned if you don't with Josh Bailey. You can't
I believe
you
it
can't
was.
yell at the guy.
I believe it was the goal in the Hurricanes game. It was his first goal of the year. Where I saw you tweet, "Damn it, Josh Bailey, what are you doing?" Something along those lines, and then 30 seconds later, he scores a goal, and I texted you laughing my ass off. I can't believe that just happened. So
Yeah.
that's the definition of Josh Bailey, polarizing.
Yeah. No, that's not wrong at all. Anthony Beauvillier.
Uh, he's a player to me that can be. He has the tools to be, let's say, there's a forward tandem, like there was a goalie tandem. If Mathew Barzal is the 1A, Beauvillier has the tools to be the 1B. He's just got to figure out, and like you said, we've been saying this forever, how to do that. And I'm not sure if he has that in him.
Interesting. And he's played better. I think if he starts doing what he did last week on a regular basis, eclipse the 20 goal mark, I think a lot of that can be erased. We've seen him do it in the
Yes,
playoffs. He needs to just do it over the course of a full season plus playoffs. And I think some fans will have some buy-in. And then, in a contract year, you almost expect him to just kind of blow up a little bit. But if he can build that momentum before 2 years in a row of good stats and solid play, that'll get you paid. Uh, and the Islanders might have some money in the next few seasons to kind of dole out, so they can keep him around. I'd be willing to bet they do.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about him is that I just think the major difference between a guy like him and Mathew Barzal is that Barzal can score 82 points of his own. Whereas if Beauvlier is going to do something similar, he needs to be equipped with the right players. And that's I think the difference there.
I agree. You mentioned Matthew Barzal. He's our next player here. What do you think?
Yeah, point per game. He's a point per game player this year. That's just what I'm seeing from him. Like I said earlier, can stand to shoot more, but he's a point per game player. He's already got 10 assists in 9 games. He's I I think it's gonna work with Wahlstrom. It's looking good. Just because I think Wahlstrom particularly looks a lot better than he did last season. And that's only going to help him. But he's the guy on that line and on the Islanders who's elevating other players. And I think he's doing that right now with the system Lambert has put in. I think it's working better for his game. So point per game player, Mathew Barzal.
He's starting to take over here and there.
Yeah.
He's really starting to be that player,
He
and if
did
he
it a
can,
little bit against Carolina. Then he really, really did it against Colorado.
yeah, if he can find that gear on a regular basis, and as the team around him learns to play with him, when to jump up, how to jump in the holes, where's he looking, what's he going to do, it makes it a little bit easier. Playing with very talented players is difficult. It's not as easy as you think. Like, oh, I could score so many goals with Connor McDavid. Forget about that. You couldn't keep up with them. But even if you could, you got to put the rest of it together. And I think the rest of the team struggled with that. I think Wahlstrom in the last 2 seasons, just trying to get his feet wet in the NHL was very hard to learn. As good of a player as Wahlstrom is, Barzell's kind of on a different level on this team than most of his teammates. Um, Bailey just has the wherewithal and the hockey IQ to be in the right spot at the right time. Um, Half the time, at least, like you said, polarizing. So Wallstrom to kind of jump in and find success there, it's not as easy as you think. You still got to keep up on that 2-on-1. He's like got to be able to put a stick on that. That's not an easy pass in stride with somebody on you. That's not as like it doesn't look easy, but it's not a tap in. Like he made it look like that. And talk about no mistake. My goodness, that puck was wired. And he barely had it on his stick. But Barzal being able to make that pass and connect it, and the two of them kind of gaining chemistry,
Yeah.
um, I think that's a sign of good things to come. Oliver Wahlstrom.
I think Wahlstrom is showing signs of being this year's Noah Dobson, right? Last year, Dobson went through some of those growing pains, but then put himself on the map. And I think Walsham has that in him this year. He's started to show, really good signs of life. He's tied for the team lead in goals with 4, tied with Anders Lee. Um, we're gonna see 1 or 2 blunders. I think it's gonna happen. But I do feel at some point, it was New Year's Day for Noah Dobson that the switch flipped and suddenly he was a 50-point defenseman. I think we're going to see something similar for Wallstrom in the forward group. You know, I think he's got that in his game. The thing I'm seeing from him is he's a little wiser on the ice. He's making better decisions. He's reliable in the neutral zone and the defensive end. He's not a liability, and it's translating well in the offensive end because he's he's not pushing the puck up the ice. That's not his role, but he knows where he has to be when the puck is going in that direction, and that's a really good sign of a guy like him who can score 25 goals, 30 goals. That might be his max this year. But if this continues, you could see it. 25 goals from a player like him.
Brocktober came at the very last minute. What do you say about Brock Nelson?
Yeah, that was a little scary there, right? You were wondering if we were gonna enter November with 0 goals from Brock Nelson, but saved by the bell, as I'd like to say. So yeah, you know, I wonder if he can reach 37 again. I don't know if he has 37 or like some said they wondered if he could reach 40. If he scores 30 goals, I think that's good. Um, the scoring. What do you end up finishing with in October? Was it 2 or 3?
I
I
think
think he
3.
finished, yeah, so he's got three goals. You know what I like about him right now? Even though he wasn't scoring, he has 9 assists. I'm sorry, 9 points, 6 assists. Where last year he didn't have many, right? I think he finished the year with like 20 something assists, if I'm not mistaken. He had, yeah, 22 assists. He's already got 6 in 9 games. So prorated over 82. Not a math guy, but it's going to be more than the 22 he had last year. So I think the points could even out from last year to this year. I think he might score a little less, but he might assist a little.
Yeah, I think, the Islanders have 3 point per game players or better, and that's just not something that you'd suspect them to have. So
Right.
it's good that it is a bunch of players with 3 and 4 goals. Um, Again, including Zach Parise. I love all of it. It's really balanced between, it's so crazy that Barzal hasn't scored. Eventually he'll get that monkey off his back. I don't think that's you were gonna wait too much longer, but um yeah, I think with Nelson, yeah, I'm not sure. As long as he hits 25, 30 goals, I'm happy. Which is again not easy, but getting to 40, I think that was just an anomaly last year. He had a lot of opportunities, just because the way that the lineup was, someone had to score goals. So
Yeah.
and it kind of just happened to be him. So we know he's capable of it, which is good. It means that's a second kind of dangerous line between him and Lee. They have 7, 8 goals together. Like that's kind of what you want to see. Um, Hopefully the two of them can kind of continue to put it together. Um,
Yeah.
Speaking of putting it together in the tandem of Sorokin and Varlamov, do you like what you're seeing so far?
Yeah, much more reliable, right? Sorokin was excellent last season, especially given the team that was playing in front of him. But he had those stretches, mainly just one. But he had that stretch where he was just as lost as the rest of the Islanders. Um, I think it's just after that he figured it out, and it was the Sorokin show once again. He made a ton of saves that just had us thinking, how the hell did he do that? But for Semyon Varlamov, you're seeing a guy who came into camp healthy. He had a good camp, or regular camp even. Had a regular preseason, and he's got his legs under him to start the year, which has put him ahead of the 8 ball. And whereas last year he was behind the 8 ball, so consistency is the word I think of with those two. Um, and with Sorokin, it's just coming at an extremely high level.
Zach Parise.
Workhorse. Like, he's the best player. He's the hardest working player on the ice. I've said this since he started with the Islanders last season. He's consistently the hardest working player on the ice. That's why his expected goals for per 60 is number one in the NHL right now. He's already got 3 goals, which is 3 more than he had to this point last season. Um, doesn't look 38. I'll say that. Does He looks maybe 30. I would buy 28 if somebody showed me a picture of him and I didn't know who he was, right? Um, but 3 goals, how many points from the fourth line? That's gravy. You take that. 3 goals, 4 points in 9 games from the third line. Gravy. You take that.
Yeah, especially with Palmieri's 2 goals, all of a sudden that third line's got 5.
Yeah.
Um, and Peugeot's solid. I don't know his stats in the faceoff circle, but he's generally pretty good, for over 50% most of the time. So um, that's what you want out of your third line is, and doesn't hurt that your fourth line's popping in a few here and there.
Peugeot's 55.9% in the faceoff dot.
Yeah, that's pretty standard, if not a little bit higher for him over the
Yeah.
course of his career, and that's just what he does. He's your Swiss Army knife. Would love to see him get on the score sheet a little bit more, but if you're just winning draws, and which is my personally my thing, that's my, even in beer league, that's my skill set is winning faceoffs and getting my butt into the front of the net. That's pretty much it. So I can respect that part of the game. Um, But yeah, you need you guys around you to kind of score some goals, and right now that's Palmieri and Parise. Last one here, Noah Dobson.
I love Noah Dobson. He's an emerging number one defenseman. Uh, he's it's funny. This isn't me saying this. Last year, Kevin Weeks said something along the lines. We see a little bit of Kale McCarr in Noah Dobson. Now, obviously, it's not to that extent. It's not to that level. But you're seeing a defenseman who can not only defend well on his own end and skate the puck in transition, but he is able to, similarly to McCarr, make a play from the blue line and help contribute on offense. Um, in the same echelon as Barzal does at the forward group, right? The Islanders were down 3-0 against the Avalanche, and not a minute later, after Rodriguez scored his second goal, Noah Dobson said, "F it, we need one," and he did it. So I think that you're seeing a defenseman who's going to put himself in the same conversation as the you know it's so hard. Projections are hard, but I think he's a guy who can put himself in the conversation with the Yosis, the McCars, the Quinn Hugheses, the Miro Heiskanens. Like, he doesn't have that same burning speed, but he's got the tools and the IQ to put himself on the ice where he needs to be. He can skate the puck decently well to put it in transition and push it up the ice, and he has a hell of a shot. He can score goals. He knows how to find good shooting lanes. Not often, like Ryan Pollock, for instance, love him as a defenseman, but he constantly shoots it into the defender's chest. Noah Dobson doesn't do that very often. He finds those shooting lanes and gets the puck through traffic. So you're seeing an emerging number one defenseman there. I know everybody likes to talk about Adam Pelech, who isn't playing Adam Pelech like this season. Um, but Noah Dobson is clearly uh, that guy who's, if he's not the number one yet, he's getting there.
I agree. Especially on the Pellic thing, I'd like him to kind of like solidify himself a little bit, kind of get back to his old ways. It could just be learning the system and jumping up in the plays and finding that
Yeah.
transition. Everyone's kind of making mistakes, and um, he's he's a player that I think will even out. I'm not worried about him. He's proven time and time again that he's that player. Pulak, I'd love for him to find the net a little bit more. He does have one on the season already, which kind of a good sign. You'd like him if he can do this over the one every 8 games or so. That's pretty good because he has scored 9 or 10 goals in a season. He's got hits the net.
Yeah.
I'm happy for him to hit somebody. It means that it was on the ice surface. Um, but usually he's missing the net, something serious. Um, I do want to get to your game though to end the
All right.
show. So what do you got?
So trick or treat, similar concept to buy or sell. If it's a trick, means you're selling. If it's a treat, you're buying. First thing I have here, New York Islanders fourth line looks like themselves again. Trick or treat?
I don't want to bet against myself. Like like they really looked bad last season, and I get maybe they're all healthier this year and they're on a really good run. I don't know if it's consistent right now. I'm on treat. But I'd be willing to bet that by Thanksgiving they might come back to earth a little bit and at least not scoring goals.
I'm gonna say treat for myself for one of the reasons that you stated, that they're healthy this season. They do that does attribute to one of the reasons why they look like their former selves. But the reason why they got healthy was because they had the time to rest this summer, right? Obviously, the outcome last season wasn't what you wanted, but it might have benefited them in the long run, by getting that rest that they haven't had in years, right? The COVID years, the back to back Eastern Conference finals that they went to were so close in proximity that um, there was really no rest in between the seasons. And the kind of game that they play where they bang bodies a lot and they're, constantly forechecking and in your face. I think that the rest this summer did them some good. And I think that they can, especially, Matt Martin was playing last season, mostly injured through from November on for the whole season. Uh, I do think that they can sustain this and give the and in the new Lambert system, it's a little bit faster, and I think that they thrive under that speed a little bit. I do think that this is something that they at least have another season looking like this. Next one, we have the Bailey Barzell and Wahlstrom line looks good. Is this a trick or a treat that will remain?
I think it's a trick. I don't think this is the line as a whole that will stay together.
Okay.
As we've seen kind of Bailey and Beauvlier switching spots, Lee has kind of gone up there a little bit. I do think Lee and Nelson are a good duo, so that should ultimately stay together. Um, Parise spent some time up there, so like I don't know what the solution is. If this just continues to be well, like I'm, happy to be wrong. I just wonder if this is the line. Um, and maybe even if Bailey doesn't play well and Wallstrom and Barzell are, maybe it doesn't matter that Bailey is just like at least he's not a liability. That might just be good enough. I'm not sold on it yet. I want to see some more. Great connections are definitely building chemistry, but as it stands right now, I don't totally buy it.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you there. I'm gonna go trick as well. I don't foresee Bailey sticking in that trio. I think the duo of Barzal and Wallstrom has a good chance to stick together. However, they're gonna have to figure out that left side. I don't think Bailey can hang with them for the remainder of the this season. Whether that's via a promotion or via trade. Let's say they're in it by February towards the trade deadline, and they need to make an acquisition. um, I don't necessarily know that Bailey can hang on the top line. There's a lot of miles on his feet, on the ice. So I think this is a trick just in the sense that Josh Bailey won't remain. Next one, trick or treat. The Islanders lead the NHL in goals for per 60.
Trick. I think they can stay up there, but that's not their game. And this is where I was talking about earlier, where they come back to earth a little bit. They're not gonna win games 1-0 or 2-0 or 2-1, and then all of a sudden score 6 and 5 and like consecutive games and just score 4 to 6 goals a game for and keep that up there.
Right.
Um, I think their expected goals might stay high just because they have a couple of players that have shown that, Zach Parise in particular. I just wonder if expected goals and actual goals will remain the same. If they'll kind of stay parallel to one another, or if one will divert from the other, even if they score goals, but their expected goals are down because they're shooting less, or the other way around, where
Yeah.
their expected goals are up because they're owning the puck a little bit more and getting those shots on goal, but they're just not going in. It could just be like we could do a test between now and at the end of the month in November and just see like did their PDO change? What's their luck? And it's an older stat, but it might be telling about are they actually scoring goals or what's changed here? Are they not getting the saves? Are other teams riding PDO benders where they're playing really well? Like what's kind of going into a little bit of this behind the scenes, but goals for per 60, not exactly an advanced stat, but better known as goals per game for the most part. But I don't see it. If they're a top team by season's end, I would be very surprised in this particular stat.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna go with trick as well, only because I still question the firepower. Right? We know Nelson can score 30. We know Lee can score 30. After that, it's a bunch of they can score 30. They have potential, or 20 even. They have potential to score 20. We're wondering if Wahlstrom can hit that plateau. We're hoping Palmieri can return to that plateau. We're thinking Beauvlier can eventually get back to that plateau. But, not many players on this team can you sit there and say, yeah, they're going to score 20, 30 goals definitively. It's Brock Nelson, it's Anders Lee, and then it's question marks from there. Last one here for you, trick or treat. Anthony Beauvillier, 4 points in the last 4 games. Is this legit? Is this Anthony Beauvillier we're going to see for the rest of the season, or does he fall off?
I'm going to buy on him. I'm going to go treat. I don't want to bet against myself.
Oh,
The team needs him to do well. He needs
wow.
to be. He needs to be this player for his own contract and whatever this offseason can mean. Whether he stays on Long Island or not after this summer, depending on contract extensions, or if he has a good season, maybe he's an asset and they trade him. I don't know what. It's hard to think so far ahead because we're trying to figure out what this roster is, and we know what we would want to change. But like if they actually start playing well, it's doubling down on the roster again, tripling down or whatever you want to call it, however many seasons. It starts to get a little tricky. So they really, for his own benefit and the team, he really needs to make this one work because we can't keep having this conversation. Eventually, we will stop having this conversation, and we know it's eventually he is what he is. He's going to show us what he is ultimately, and this is what we all thought he could be, and he's shown it in the playoffs, as we said. He really needs to show up for himself. He needs to show up. So yeah, I'm gonna go.
Interesting.
I'll go treat. I don't want to bet against the team.
Interesting. I'm gonna have the opposite. I'm gonna say trick. I don't think history favors him. We've been, like you said, traditionally having this discussion every year, saying, he's the perennial breakout guy. Uh, doesn't really ever follow through with that, and hasn't really until this point. We've seen flashes of this, right? Oh, Beauvillier collected 5 points in his last 5 games. He's looking like he's really getting going, and then the following 6 or 7 games, he has maybe an assist. So I'm going to go with trick on this one. He needs to show me more of a sample size of consistency. And that wraps it up for the, I guess, first edition of what will become buy or sell on Nassaumen Hockey here. We're going to do more of these because this was fun.
Yeah, I like that. I like the name association, but I do like this too because it's some larger trends and some different things. And that wraps it up for the show as well. Thanks for bringing that kind of last minute note to the show. That was definitely fun. Make sure you please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Nassaumen Hockey. You can find James' work at The Fourth Period, and you can find my work at The Hockey Writers. And make sure to subscribe to Isles Fix, an excellent curated Islanders daily newsletter. James, bring us home.
Until next time, all. Let's go, Islanders.